marvelous hello, friends and loved ones. How are you today? You know, I've talked about a lot of different types of things on this channel. I've covered individual games, I've covered series of games, and I've done random lists that include games that otherwise aren't really all that connected to one another. But one thing I've never really talked about in detail is one of my favorite aspects of video games: the music. Music is such a powerful thing in video games. It's what really sucks us into the world and helps keep us immersed. I mean, come on, whose blood doesn't start boiling when you hear this song coming up in Ace Attorney? Yeah, I thought so. So with today finally being the release date of the long-awaited Yooka-Laylee, I decided to dedicate this episode to one of my favorite composers in all of video games, the absolutely amazing Grant Kirkhope. Most people who know Grant's work know him from his work with Rareware, and he's done some awesome stuff there. I mean, this was the man responsible for the GoldenEye 64 pause track. You know the one. I wonder if I could get that song onto my Apple Watch. The following joke was not funny, but I'm not going to apologize for it. Most people are already aware of the fantastic work Grant Kirkhope has done for Rare, providing music for such tunes as
DK Rap, Perfect Dark, Grabbed by the Ghoulies, Viva Pinata,
and many more. Killer Instinct 2 for the arcade and SNES was apparently the first game Grant worked on for Rare where you can hear his guitar and trumpet on some of the tracks, but a lot of people are already very familiar with Grant's work with Rare. Today, I wanted to shine the light on a few games he's worked on that don't seem to get as much attention as the Rareware stuff. First up is Yaiba Ninja Gaiden Z for the Xbox 360. I picked this up a few years ago and was super psyched to see that it came with a physical copy of the complete soundtrack. The CD was playing in my car on loop for months. The game is a gritty, almost comic book style hack and slasher, but unlike previous Ninja Gaiden games where you play as the noble and honorable Ryu Hayabusa, here we're Yaiba Kamikaze, a dead cyborg ninja dude that's rude, crude, and full of attitude. There are a lot of combos to pull off with the three major weapons you have access to, and you've got backup in the form of Miss Monday. The two characters have really good chemistry together, making for fun banter as you mow your way through hordes of zombies. Soundtrack-wise, this seems like such a departure from what we usually get from Kirkhope, and I mean that in the best possible way. I'm not even sure what I'd call it. Electro, synth, metal? Whatever it is, it's over the top and fits this game perfectly. Also, you can play as Beck from Mighty No. 9. That's worth mentioning. Hell yeah. Next up is Disney and Sega's remake of Castle of Illusion starring Mickey Mouse. And this may be one of my favorite games to hear Grant's soundtrack come out of. I'm well aware that some of them are remasters of the Shigenori Kamiya tracks, but there's no denying that Kirkhope's style for musical composition works really well in a Disney environment. The plot of the game is that the witch Mizrabel kidnaps Minnie Mouse so she can steal her youth and beauty and... Wait... An ugly witch stealing a girl to steal her beauty. Why does that sound familiar? I'm sure it's nothing. This game is a lot of fun and a great remake of the old classic, with fresh graphics and a wonderful new soundtrack behind it. As much as I'd love to recommend it, apparently this game is pretty hard to get these days. The game has been completely removed from Steam, PSN, and as far as I know, the Xbox Live Store, so I'm not sure where people are expected to get a copy. Supposedly the game can still be acquired on mobile devices, but I don't know if I could recommend this game without a controller. I mean, the Steam copy even recommends using one. Even if you can't get the game, I still recommend listening to the soundtrack. Kirkhope blends so well with Disney, it's impossible not to smile while you listen to it. Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning is one of those games I just kind of ignored when it first came out. I mean, this was the era of open-world fantasy RPGs, which is a genre I've always had a hard time getting into anyway. But it just seemed to be overshadowed by Skyrim having just come out and Dragon's Dogma on the horizon. It wasn't until a few years later I picked it up during a Steam sale, and I'm really glad that I did. The whole world has a very cartoonish feel, and the color design was particularly noteworthy for me. You play as someone who died, but were brought back to life, and have the power to change the fate of people around you. Sometimes by just killing them. I wouldn't say the game does anything extraordinarily well, but I've still been having fun playing it. It's a well-built fantasy RPG with decent writing and characters. Grant's soundtrack on this one is much more atmospheric. A lot of the times, I didn't even really notice it until a dramatic sting kicked in, but it helped keep me immersed in the overall game. I even tried to make my character look like Grant Kirkhope, but the character creation options were somewhat limited. All in all, it's a nice background soundtrack that really keeps you invested in the world of Amalur. If you like these types of games and maybe glossed over this one yourself, I recommend picking it up. It's pretty easy to find these days. Kirkhope also did work on the new Ghostbusters game from 2016, and let me just get this out of the way, this is one of the most boring games I've ever played in my life. The game acts as a sort of sequel, spin-off, / tie-in to the new movie, and you play a team of Ghostbusters we've never even met before. I have no idea who any of these characters are, and frankly, I don't think the game really wants you to know, because it doesn't even tell you their names on the character select screen. It's a cooperative twin-stick shooter, and you just explore these long, winding, linear corridors, shooting whatever pops up. Occasionally you have to actually trap ghosts, which is just as dull and repetitive as the rest of the game. The whole game feels really slow, and these levels are way too long. Every time I thought I was almost done, it turned out I was just at another checkpoint. Aside from the gameplay, the writing is equally terrible, with all 4 characters constantly spouting one-liners trying to out-cool each other, except none of them are actually cool to begin with.
Survey says, nailed ya.
The soundtrack is probably the best part about this game. Kirkhope has a real knack for these cartoony, haunted, spooky themes, which is essentially what most of this game is comprised of. It's just a shame that I have to enjoy it over the repetitive gun noises and endless quips from the characters. I'd skip this one and just see if you can get your hands on a copy of Grabbed by the Ghoulies. I can't really recommend this game, even with the awesome soundtrack, especially not at full price. But hey, if you want to get some friends together, have a pizza party, and riff the game a bit, you might end up having a good time. At least you'd get to listen to some nice tunes, but I'd wait till you find it for cheap.
Gertrude, you finally decided to show up to your own party. A little late, considering you're the ghostess of this little fright fest.
And now, I think we've got to talk about the big one. I've put it off this entire episode because I wanted to save it for last. What many people consider not only the best work Grant Kirkhope has ever done, but one of the greatest games ever made. Doubly so with how much charm his work added to the overall experience. That's right, folks. It's time for... Fart Cat for iOS devices. It's a kitty and you feed it food and then you poke its little tummy and make it fart. Endless arcade fun perfectly suited to the upbeat, bouncy tunes of Grant Kirkhope. All kidding aside, I actually do really like the tune Grant composed for this. But, okay, for real, we'll talk about Banjo-Kazooie. I mean, how could we not, right? This was the first game he had free reign on, and man, talk about knocking it out of the park. From its memorable theme song all the way to its end, this game had some amazing music. Every level track is so memorable and really captures the feel of the stage. They're so catchy and fun, I find myself humming one of these tunes at least once or twice a week. I know this video isn't supposed to focus on stuff he did with Rare, and really, what can I say about Banjo-Kazooie that hasn't already been said, but there's no way we're getting through this episode without talking about these two. If you've never played Banjo-Kazooie or its sequel, I can't recommend them enough. They're both insanely great titles and really do have one of the greatest soundtracks in all of video games. So I'm going to be cutting this video off here, but I hope I've gotten to show you guys a couple of the games Grant Kirkhope has done in the past, and a lot of them are pretty great. Except Ghostbusters. But even then, the music was still good. There are so many other games that Grant has worked on that I haven't even touched base on in this episode. Civilization Beyond Earth, Drop Zone, A Hat in Time, the list goes on. Feel free to check out any of the games he's done. His work is astounding. So, now that this is done, if you'll all excuse me, I really just want to go play Yooka-Laylee. So, see you next time. I don't have a joke here. I actually just want to go play video games. Cool. Megaten reference.